All systems going. Appears to be. Had some network issues earlier this morning, but I think those have been resolved. Not my network issues. Regional network issues. Starting to get warmed up here after a few days away. Hope everyone's doing well out there in Twitch land. Started today's stream late. I had a bunch of things to do. It's that time of the year. Yesterday I did not come on and stream, and I'll talk a little bit about why. Not that it's a particularly big deal, though Monday tends to be a pretty active day, Monday afternoon. But I forgot to do Tuesday afternoon for an hour or two. So, from the Tomes, Twitch TV from the Tomes, YouTube at Fox and Boar Games, and the landing pad at www.foxandboargames.com, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fox and Boar Games, though there is a high likelihood my Twitter engagement will be shrinking to 2-0 in the coming weeks. And again, this isn't a big protest thing. It's simply that I think the platform is not, at this point, have the sustained viability that it once did. And I don't get that much engagement from it. I get some. I definitely get a little bit. But, again, you know, there's other ways I could spend my time, but instead of tweeting. And that's what I'm really starting to realize now that I've upped the social media and the YouTube activity, is that there are a lot of ways to spend my time. Getting work done is the primary. And, you know, every little bit of social media takes 5-10 minutes out of the day. And that doesn't sound like much. But when it's an hour later and instead of writing, you've been maintaining your social media, it does become a thing. So, but in any case, thanks everybody for the subscriptions, the follows, the likes, the support. That's why I keep doing this. People seem to be enjoying it. I'm just getting a couple things set up here. So while I'm getting these couple things set up, yesterday I did not run my Monday afternoon stream, which, except for the Wednesday night stream, tends to be possibly the most popular. And the reason just being I just ran out of time. You know, some holiday stuff I had to take care of. We're not doing a lot this year, but there were a few things we decided to do, and I wanted to get stuff taken care of yesterday. Then when I got home, I had a chat with Chris Urban, who is a former student and very good designer and creative. And I've hinted that I have another game coming, aside from Tales of the Hallowed Land. I mean, I have 2 of my own that are kind of in progress. We'll see how those go towards the summer when I wanted to release stuff. But Chris has this really great board game. I remember I talked to a number of people here about my experience at PAX Unplugged, starting out in the Unpub area, not realizing it was very quick board game prototypes instead of RPGs, and I realized I was totally in the wrong area. Maybe if I brought my board game, I could have done that, but I did not. I brought only the Tales of the Hallowed Land RPG, and I realized very quickly that I was not in the right spot, you know, and I decided I would take a little escape and go to the to go to the free play RPG area under the advice of Curzon, who's done it before, and set up there. And of course, I got a much better response. But I did have Chris come and take my slots. He took over my slots at PAX Unplugged in the Unpub area for a game called Whirlpool, in which you are pirate ships attempting to navigate around this whirlpool that is trying to suck you in. Now, the joy of this, of course, is being pirate ships. You also are attempting to gain treasure that has fallen off of other shipwrecks. And possibly combat each other and fight each other. And he playtested this for quite a few hours Saturday. And it was extremely successful. There were mixed reviews of the game. You know, I mean, everything from I love it to, you know, oh, it needs to be more complex, or I want to see this in it. But as I said to him, you know, especially when you're dealing in an environment that is really made for game designers prototyping each other. Let's see who's there. Oh, hey, Peach, what's up? How are you? Festive Solstice, yes. The big day is tomorrow. Well, Solstice Eve today. Tomorrow is the actual turn, I think, at 4 o'clock. And we'll have a fire going. I will be on to chat tomorrow night, though. I'm about to get to that. Probably already saw the topic. But so he and I had a good long chat yesterday afternoon about the feedback he got on his Whirlpool game. And I do want to release this game. I think it could be really, really widely well received. It's fun. The current incarnation is very fast. And that was one of the feedback points he got, is that, oh, you know, this could be a lot more complicated and it could be a longer game. And I'm like, you know what? So you run into this issue of the wish list, the playtest wish list, right? Like, absolutely everybody. It really sells, right? I mean, he was playtesting with people who are prototyping some very good but much more complicated games. His original idea was this was going to be a game for like 14-year-olds, you know, 10 to 14-year-olds. I'm like, no, man. Everybody I know is going to want to build their own pirate ship and swim around the whirlpool and try to knock other people into the whirlpool or cause other people to get dashed upon the rocks and take all the treasure and run. What does that guy know? Right, yeah, exactly. So you know, he got very good, but it was all good feedback. And we went over it yesterday. We like fine-toothed it. And he's going to be working on it, and I'm going to hopefully assist him in doing some play tests in the next month or so, and he's going to try to get some more play testing going on his end. He doesn't really have an active game group. He's primarily a computer gamer, not a tabletop player, but he has a really good design mind and a really good creative mind. So his game is one of several. There's Patrick's epic miniature battle game that is just fantastic, and it's generic. It's meant to be played with any miniatures, everything from Lego men to Warhammer miniatures to, you know, War Machine miniatures to whatever you want to play it with, cardboard cutouts. And it's a really fun game. And again, it's really fast. You get the satisfaction of this miniature, you know, post-apocalyptic, you know, futurist skirmish that you can complete with 2 squads facing off in a very short amount of time. And there's another game that I really want to release that another student, Zach of mine, did. Totally not in my wheelhouse at all. It's this very experiential card game, charting. You know, it's very anime-esque. The main character is this very anime-esque girl, and you're basically charting her anxiety and depression over these days. But it's also funny because it's like it really resonates, especially with, I would say, an 18 to 25-year-old crowd. And it's really good. It has some really good tracking systems, some really good time-lapse systems. that's going to take a little longer. But I'm hoping Chris's game is ready to go in some form within maybe the next 6 months, because I think it's something that will be a big seller. And as far as the fast, and I was like, okay, so put out a supplement, put out an expansion box. Like, this is what we saw with King of Tokyo. So the funny thing is with King of Tokyo, which is one of my favorite board games, because you can play a game in 20 minutes, 20 minutes. But it's very luck based, but it's also a little strategically based in terms of how you use the cards, the special abilities. My initial appeal of that game was just this King of the Hill movie monster fight. Then we got all the various expansions. But King of New York's actually fine. King of New York's good. It adds like the army pieces and getting power by killing off certain other pieces. And I think that it adds. But then we got all these other supplements that give the monsters all these other tactical abilities. They introduce like Cthulhu cults and stuff like that. And after a while, it was more like a game of Risk. I was like, okay, this isn't King of Tokyo anymore. And, that's kind of how I felt about his Whirlpool game. Like, the joy of it is simply, in my opinion, the simplicity of it, the quickness of it, the visual appeal of the pirate ships. But I think as soon as you start adding a lot of the additional rules people wanted, I think it's going to get a little bogged down. It's not going to be the same game. And we had that discussion. Like, this is your game. It's great for people to have all these ideas, but ultimately you're the one designing it. I'm potentially the one publishing it. And, unapologetically at this point, I'm looking for marketability too. I can market a game that is a 15 to 25 minute game that could be played from ages 10 to 100 much more easily than I can a game that's going to take an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you have to be a war gamer to get through it. So it's a taste thing. And I said to him, also keep in mind, not every game is going to appeal to every gamer. There are games I sat down at PAX and I did an unplugged. I did in the demo hall. I did several games, and there were some that were winners. And I'm like, you know what? I didn't, but I would buy this game and play it. I didn't only because we have a bunch of games we haven't even played yet. But I'm like, you know what? There are other games I sat down and I'm like, this is a very well designed experience. I don't ever want to play it again. And I was very honest with the developers, and they were all like, that's cool, have fun, And I'm the same way. You're gonna play something I do, you might not. So see ya. Yeah, no. I mean, Risk is interesting. Well, okay, so here's where I'm at. And this is where I was at with Arkham Horror and Betrayal and House of the Hill and some of those games. If I'm going to get 3 to 5 people together and sit there for 4 hours... Hey, Wolfie. Yeah, no thanks. If I'm going to get that many people together and play a game, I'm going to want to play a role-playing game. Now, I understand somebody has to facilitate that. Yeah. No. I mean, we had 10-hour Warhammer days. We had 10-hour 40K days when we were in high school and, well, after high school, in college. And time was very different then. We had 25-hour RPG sessions. In fact, PJ knows we sometimes had 72-hour RPG sessions, but things are different now. And not only, and not only like, oh, we're all old, we have stuff to do. Okay, yes, there's that. Being that I was supposed to get on here at like 11:30 today, I didn't get on until 1:30. And it was all stuff that needed to be done. Forget all that. Players are very different now. And there are very few players now that will sit and spend, 2, 5, 6 hours on a game, even an RPG. In fact, it was really interesting to me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was just going to make a snide comment about substance abuse, but I decided not to. Or some people actually did that on a cocaine binge, but that's a whole other story, which is not my thing and never was. So I was joking around when I posted from PAX that I was running a game at a slot 1:30. My one friend who I also know from LARPs, and she was like, I thought you were running your game at 1:30 a.m. I was like, well, you know full well that I used to do this. But these days, if I'm in bed by midnight, I'm good, you know, and I'm more than good. I'm okay. I'm more than willing to not necessarily do it. Well, absolutely, yeah. In those days, in those games in the early '90s, especially the ones in New York City, yeah. I mean that was just so implicit in that whole culture. Um, yeah, it was funny. This one guy, he was in some of our games. I won't name him. He was in some of our games. He wasn't a big player. He was just someone that happened to be into that scene. He was also into the goth scene and all that. And we were there sitting there one day, and it was like wasn't even that late. It was like 9 p.m. We were sitting in the lobby of the hotel, like sort of in character, sort of not. And he was like, "Oh, do you want some?" And he just like pulls out Coke. I'm like, "No." I'm like, not only do I not want it, pulling it out here in the lobby is a pretty dumb effing thing to do. You know, oh my god. I was like, man, like okay, you know, impaired judgment. Anyone? And again, he was one of those guys that I always found very tolerable. He wasn't like a psycho or a weird guy or anything. He was like he was a gamer. He was one of your average clubber gamer vampire players. I was just kind of like, yeah, no, guy, I don't think we're gonna do that. I mean, go ahead, do whatever you want, but yeah. So gaming has really changed, and I don't feel the necessity at this point to necessarily create games that take this long to play. In fact, in Tales recently, when I was going over some of the rules restructures with my longtime group, my friend Neil said, "Oh, I have this idea for, a way you could use one of these abilities." Basically, it was interesting. It was similar to something I had originally had in the game, but then it ended up like making things more complex. And I'm like, look, I'm not into making this game any more complex. I think if anything now has to be streamlined and integrated into the current system. I don't think anybody will benefit from having another thing to keep track of during the game. Like, I really don't. 4 to 6 hours, I think, is reasonable. We are hedging on the 2.5 to 3.5 hour slot. That's just the personality of the group. I would be happy with a solid 4 hours. I mean, I'm still at the point, if we could get started by 7 o'clock, I would run a game till midnight. No problem. We have a smaller group now than we ever have. I think we have a more focused group. So even though it's a little bit less for every game that we get into, it's less like, oh, let's have dinner and get drinks and hang out and be buddies. It's much more focused gaming. I think we get a lot more done, even in that 2.5 to 3 hours. And I'm actually really okay with all of that. I'm totally fine with that. Yeah, I mean, you know what? There's even like one aspect of Tales that I'm still looking at and thinking, you can pare this down even more. You can make this even quicker. And that's combat. And the issue I have is that RPG combat always takes ridiculously long. Like, especially if the characters have any kind of fighting chance, And I'm kind of just like, so I think the resolution's going to be, let's take a look at that now. So what I usually do is I usually have a half hour beforehand where we just hang out and catch up. Especially like if it's a game where we haven't seen each other for 3 weeks or whatever. I usually do a half hour hangout. That's when we have food. Usually I'll either if I cook or if people bring stuff or if we order out. And again, this group is really awesome because everybody does contribute. Everybody cooks or brings stuff or brings beer or whatever. I say let's get that out of the way now. And in fact, even the current Tales games, I've basically made them an alcohol light or alcohol free game. We have one player who's alcohol free, and I've said, you know what, let's make this alcohol light, because there were plenty of nights with our 4 or 5 hour, 7 person D&D sessions where by the end of the night I was like, okay, so are we just going to sit and drink or are we going to finish the game? Because, hey, I'm good for either, like I'll do either. But at this point, like if we're going to game, I want to game, and I'm kind of at that point. Yeah, that's what we do. Because you know what? Again, I'm all about just BSing. I'm all about hanging out and being friends. But I'm also at the point that, look, especially if I'm running the game, and I'm a lot less type A than I used to be about it, but if I'm running the game, if I've put a lot of work into it, I kind of want the game to be the thing. Like a lot of the D&D games we played when we had the really big group, I mean, a lot of it was almost automated. Again, D&D, I find it so easy to come up with ideas for. Maybe not great ideas, but ideas to entertain a group of 6 people. And they wanted very beer and pretzels gaming sessions. So, look, another orc camp or whatever the monster is, but it's basically all still an orc camp, right? They had no problem me just kind of like winging a lot of it and it being silly, and that's fine. But some of this stuff, like if I'm going to run something like Call of Cthulhu, I mean, I'm not really running World of Darkness at this point, but if I were going to run that, chat lag, yeah, there's a little chat lag. It's I'm flipping around between windows. It gets upset when I flip around between windows. I've noticed that. That's the one flaw of OBS I've seen, that when I have it when I have it port the chat in, if I'm flipping between windows and a message comes through, it takes a second. And I've found no resolution for that. So apologies, guys, but that's unfortunately, that's a feature, not a bug. No, I think it's a bug. I think you're good now because I think I got the window open I finally want to open. So, I guess I'll share something now. I mean, share my screen. Let's see. So yeah, I didn't get on yesterday for that reason. I had some stuff I had to do in the morning that of course always takes longer than you think it will. And then I got on the phone with Chris and we talked a lot about his game. And I think that was absolutely valuable. I mean, I don't regret that at all. So, but tomorrow night, Dungeons and Dollars, the debate that is currently raging in the RPG sector after White Wolf, yeah, that was really Freudian. After Wizards of the, there's a whole other conversation I had about White Wolf and money. That Hasbro and WotC executives have made this statement that they don't feel D&D is monetized enough. And I'm like, everybody who's been doing this for any length of time is like, are you effing out of your minds? Like, okay, the writers and the developers are doing the work as usual. Like, you're not doing anything. You know how much money D&D Beyond is raking in every day? Like again, it's probably not as much as some of us think, but again, just this statement was just like, you're gonna ruin it, aren't you? Like corporatization and greed is gonna ruin it. You have it at the point that it's finally at the point it was supposed to be at, and you're gonna ruin it, right? But we'll get into all this tomorrow because clearly I have opinions on this. And again, we don't know how it's going to go. This was 2 fireside chats. This was a fireside chat statement from from GW. I mean, who finally have recouped. GW has finally become legitimate again, like after a decade of basically people just stopped buying their stuff because it's still out of control. One Warhammer miniature, one Blood Bowl miniature is insane. Now, guaranteed, you get the core sets of the games, you get a lot of stuff. But you want that one champion figure or star player for Blood Bowl, and some of these are $30 for a plastic miniature. Like, again, it's always your choice to buy it or not. So. Oh, I think it's going to get much worse than that. But we'll talk about this tomorrow. I don't want to get too derailed, but I figured I would announce, since you've probably already seen it online that I would announce tomorrow's hot take. I've got some interesting people interested in this too. A couple of people are, responding to the invite that have been doing this somewhat professionally for a while. So it'd be nice if they showed up. I don't know. They might just show up and keep their mouths shut though too. So it'll be interesting. It's an interesting new territory. Oh, Forge World. I mean, some of their miniatures are really nice, but it's crazy. Like I didn't mind paying $30 for the Death Roller. I'm like, all right, it's basically a dwarven tank that steamroller. It's a dwarven tank steamroller. It's not even that big of a model. It's not like the old Rhino models from 40K that were like full size tanks compared. But I was like, all right, I'll pay $30 for this. When I looked at the 1-star player, I'm like, I'm not paying $30 for one plastic guy. like I'm just not, you know. Yeah, for Lehman Russ $100. Yep. Crazy. Again, like I just, and again, GW's gotten better. That's the scary part. Yeah, 2-scale Titan. Yeah, seriously. Okay, so the $100 for the scaled Titan I would buy, just because that's like if they had a Blood Bowl Treant that was actually scale, sure, I'd spend the money on that because that'd be awesome to just have this one giant Treant out over the entire field, Okay, that has reach over the entire field. I'd be all about that. Oh yeah, it should all be for free, including my game. War 2-scale Warhounds, that's pretty cool. Like I said, a quality miniature like that, of that scale, I'm like, sure, you got me. Like I said, the Death Roller, I was like, yeah, I'll buy that. No problem. I was like, it's a dwarven tank and steamroller combined. That's not really fully scaled, but it's scaled enough. Yeah, okay. Yeah, just out the Elven Decker on the corner. Information wants to be free. Again, this is a very complicated topic, and though I have my strong opinions, okay, so I'll counter my strong opinions with, as a guy who wants to publish his own game and other games, I'm keenly aware that you can't rely on everybody in a gaming group buying your stuff and supporting you. I know that from firsthand experience. But proposing video game like subscription models are just like, you're just like, you really are not taking the pulse of this, are you? Well, so here's the thing. It's all about the community. The Blood Bowl community is awesome. The Blood Bowl community is like, if you want to print up your team of clowns and field them as human players, or if you want to make orc clowns and field them, as long as you can tell what the individual pieces are, what position they're playing, who cares? The 40K community is still not quite there. Now, I remember I got shit for not using specific Space Marine colors on my Blood Angels at one point. And I was like, really? Really? Which is why I stopped doing 40K. Oh yeah, no. I still have painting. I don't have as much time to paint as I once did, but I take 1 week out, as some of you saw on my post, my Chaos team. I take 1 day out a week at this point. I'm going to take Sunday out to work on stuff like painting some miniatures. But I would, I'd have no problem paying for professionally painted miniatures either. Because while I can paint at a very high quality, it takes a lot of time. And when I want to field a team, I want to field a team. I'll do shading. I'll do a deep wash. I'll do highlights. I'll do some accents. But, even Justin, the work he did on his Skaven team, each individual player's a character. He did such this. But it also took him a really long time to get his team done. And I'm kind of like, I want to field the team. I want my team. I want to play my game. So let's see. I was talking a little bit earlier about things that revisioning. Yeah, my characters are pretty detailed for the amount of time it takes me to do them, but I know if I spent that amount of time on one miniature like I used to do. You know, I had some miniatures that did go in local convention contests and get at least runner up or honorable mention or something. Well, yeah, and the GW painting, there's such a way that it's done, and I don't do that. You know, I paint miniatures like I've always painted miniatures. It's kind of old school war game miniature painting style, so they don't always look like these, you know, specific, you know, properly shaded, etc., according to GW standards. But I don't care. As long as they look good on the board. And I am a person that thinks miniature games are miniature games. Like, there was recently a debacle on the Blood Bowl forum. And again, this group's really open-minded. But somebody said, what if I wanted to field a team of Lego pieces, Lego players? And on one hand, I'm like, okay, are all the pieces going to be Lego? Like, on all teams? Like, are you going to have Lego Skaven? Because, all right, I could be into this, right? You're going to have Lego Beastmen? Okay. Lego Minotaurs? All right, I'm good. If it's like, I'm just going to put my Lego guys down. All right, then, I mean, this is a game where the visual appeal is a big part of it. And that's even where I'm like, I don't know. You know, it depends how good they looked. Now, the irony was, you realize those are more expensive per piece than GW players, right? But that wasn't the point. There is apparently one coach in France that he has a whole league. He has all the teams that he redid as Legos. And that's pretty cool. I'm like, all right, whatever, you know. To me, that was always like the issue of fielding non-painted armies, unpainted armies. Like, I get it. Not everybody's a painter. I really get it. Not everybody has the time or the energy and they just want to play the game. But you could at least put a coat down. You could at least put a base coat down. Like, your Ultramarines, you could put the base coat blue and then paint their guns black. I mean, even that, I think, is an attempt to integrate it into the visual environment, especially if you're going to play in a game where people do all the custom terrain and all that kind of stuff. You know, I think then you do have kind of this responsibility, like, to make it feel like you're playing the game. The miniature should help compel you to play the game through visual appeal. And again, I think you have to evaluate that's part of the hobby. That is part of the hobby. Playing a miniature game is, you know, because otherwise you could play the version on the computer, and that's fine too. Yeah, it can be done, right. And again, I'm not saying everybody has to paint like my friend Lisanne Lake, who comes on here sometimes, who is a professional painter, professional artist of 50 years or 40 years now. You know, I'm not saying everybody has to have armies that look like hers. Ink dipping is so easy. The new contrast mediums they have to do base coats, like you could get, yeah, you dip and done, or just contrast coat, then a base coat color, and it looks like a good miniature. Well, you just do one. So that's if you just do one solid color, it's all about control of the paint too. And the good thing is, like, I think the newer paints, like the ones I use from Reaper and the newer GW paints, they're very even. It's not even a case anymore where you can goop stuff up too easily. Oh yeah, I mean, again, I've seen streamers. I don't follow them a lot, but Amy Painter, yeah. Yeah, there's so much now with the modern paints that you could get a presentable miniature like a Blood Bowl team in a day. Like, easy. You could just do one or two coats and they look good. They look good. And part of it is the new paints that they've developed that just make it so quick. I mean, I was shocked how smooth even the Reaper paints are. I admit, yeah, sure. Drop in a shout out. Put a link. That's part of what this is for. Oh, I feel bad. I forgot to tune into Curzon's stream last night. I'll have to watch it. Apologies, Tom. I forgot to tune into your game last night. I didn't even sit down until like 9 o'clock, and I totally went out of my head. Cool. Pop that link open. Let's see what we got. Speed Paint. Yes, allow all the cookies. Is it an English site? Denmark. It's a Danish site. Okay. So the European sites, they're all so about. Oh, cool. So this is their own line of paints as well and Technique. I think I've seen a little bit of the Army Painter. Those look really good. Like I said, I was shocked. I wish I'd had the contrast paints all that when I did my Gene Stealers for Space Hulk, because they're all basically, you know, kind of uniform color. One coat painting solution. That looks really nice. Yeah, like I said, I've been watching a lot more videos in terms of working with contrast paints and contrast mediums, and it's just crazy. Like, you just put the color down and it looks good, you know? You're like, wow, you know? Cool. I will keep this in mind. I'm kind of, I love Reaper's paints. I like the range. I like the application. I like the price. Again, I know GW stuff really works for their miniatures, but man, you know, sometimes $6 a paint pot or $8 a paint pot, kind of like everything else GW does. But I mean, they do good stuff. Looks cool. Huh, hard palette, not a wet palette. Okay. He has his own goblin. That's cool. Yeah, they look really nice. Here's what's funny too, you know, like most people when they hit a certain age, I've had to start using magnifying goggles to paint. And like, you know, under those you see every little flaw. Every little thing that you've done wrong is really huge looking. So I'm always like, this looks awful, you know? Then if I take the goggles off and put the miniatures down and go back 2 hours later and I look at them with my naked eye, I'm like nobody's going to notice like half the things that are wrong with this. So I've had to kind of train myself to do that too. Oh yeah, taking a foam pick. Oh, everything. I know. Everything. I did that. I did that when I showed off the Chaos team that I painted. As soon as I posted, I was like, I see everything wrong with these. But yeah, you know, again, like I said, I do get it that it's a thing. Like some people really get into it, they really enjoy it, and other people not so much. But to me, it is part of the hobby. To me, it is part of the hobby. And again, you know, going back to the kind of what platform this off is, it is a luxury, right? Nobody has to play Warhammer or Blood Bowl, you know. So yes, this stuff is expensive, but I also know what material production costs. Even the little bit of research I've done so far with producing games, like even one small board game costs a lot more to produce than what most people think, and that's why Kickstarters ask for $30,000. You know, it's you can't produce a board game anymore with just $5,000. So. Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, I've also had like 8 years of art school. So, so that's, I said that to Neil one day that he was frustrated with this one piece. And I posted like the 10 orcs I banged out in 2 hours. I'm like, don't forget, I've also had like a lot of formal training doing this kind of stuff, you know? So, and that's the thing. I think if you get into doing it at a certain age, even if you're like okay at it, you develop a skill. Because you can develop a skill without a lot of like art experience or creative training. Painting miniatures can be paint by numbers and they look great. But if you don't get started doing it at some point, I think that's where Blake runs into the frustration. You know, I think it's just it gets to the point of diminishing returns. How long is it going to take me to do this versus the results? Hey, like I said, assembling those little plastic miniatures, I can't stand it. I paid a student to do it, and he's really good at it. And he puttied them up, and he, did a lot of like really nice work on them. And for doing like over 100 miniatures, what he charged me was not bad. So, talking about speed and streamlining in games. Let's see. Well, but you don't need it. Again, like anymore with basically the paint by number systems, like through Citadel, with the paint sets that they have now, you don't even have to think. But the question is, do you want to spend the time developing the skill for that really fine, like applying it? Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it all definitely comes down to skill set, ability. I'm a firm believer too that especially something like painting a miniature, if you really want to learn how to do it, you could be painting decent miniatures. But again, how much energy and time? Okay, that's like me learning drums. I've managed to get pretty good at melody instruments through a lot of work. I'm fairly convinced that in the amount of time I have left in my life, I would never be as good at drums as I'd ever want to be, because I think that's one of those things. Either you start doing it when you're really young and you develop a sense of rhythm, or you have an aptitude for it. And there are certain things I do believe. I believe rhythm, drumming is one of those things. Some people are really good at it right out of the gate, and you can learn it, but you're never going to be as good at it necessarily as a person who can naturally get rhythm. So, as Johnny Cash said, get rhythm. Well, that's it. And right. And you kind of decide how your path is going to take you. Right, exactly. You know what? I would so Justin paints his miniatures when he actually manages to escape from his two children and his day job at night, and he basically locks himself in an upstairs part of their music studio and just locks himself in where nobody can get him, and paints miniatures for a couple hours. And he has no problem spending 2 hours on one Rat Man, like in a focused fashion, and getting this really cool figure. Rhythm is tough to get. Even in the melodic sense, the musical structure sense, rhythm is still very hard for me to get. I can play the melody. I can read the music and play the melody, but getting the rhythmic count is still really hard for me to get. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, the Techley album we recorded without click tracks because we wanted it to sound more or less live, and we were all like, we're never doing that again. And Dan's a great drummer. Like, he's great. But even with a great drummer, being able to keep everybody on track, it's all of us have been like, we're never going to do that again. Ever. No matter what project or who we're involved with in terms of music, we're never gonna try that again. It was just really rough, because you get to a certain point where if someone's a little off, you know. Well, playing to a click track also isn't easy. Like you think like, oh, I should have to play along to it. It is really unforgiving. No, absolutely, no, absolutely. And again, I find those programs, those games, very hard to wrap my mind around because I keep trying to play these things like an instrument, not a game. and I find it really difficult. I've seen like professional drummers have trouble with those because they're trying to play it like a drum and not play it like a game. Which again, that's cool. I found it really counterintuitive. The one time I sat down with Rock Band, one of my friends a number of years ago had it. I was just like, nope. Well, it's yeah, and it's actually right, and it's actually not. It sounds close, but it isn't. And part of it is, and I know at least PJ also plays music. Part of it is what you do when you play music is so intuitive. Trying to follow a pattern is I think more difficult. Follow a gamified pattern. Having said that, though, yeah, you can learn rhythm. I mean, I've gotten a lot better from having no rhythmic sense 15 years ago when I really started this. But as a kid, I had really good rhythmic sense, and I did music as a kid, and if you don't keep up on it, exactly having your own hand, that's exactly it, and that's what I always found vexing about those games. But it's a different thing, like people I know play them and love them, and they're like, but I don't have to worry about being a good musician. I could just feel like I'm playing music. I'm like, that's cool. Yeah, that's what it is. So I mentioned earlier about streamlining combat even further, and I think the reason why combat can be very slow in Tales. Yeah, exactly. It's for fun. It's a different thing. Right. You don't have to actually sit there and practice and learn it. And you practice the game in terms of playing the game. But not like me this morning where I sat there for 45 minutes going over one small part again and again on the one hurdy-gurdy piece. Just like until I got, and I still don't have it, until I got like the exact finger positioning and timing right. Well, that's part of it too. It is cool to feel like you're playing the drums or playing, you know, a Metallica song or something. Not to mention you don't have to spend all that money on music gear. I mean, sure, you've bought the game and the console, but yeah, that's fast. That song is really fast, and it's just constant drums. It's just yeah. That's like what is it? Into Burna, which is the old medieval song that we've played. That we play the basically thrash version of. We've played the thrash version of, and but at the end of that, the drummer's just like he's like, okay, y'all really suck. Like y'all really really suck. Oh, that's pretty cool. You could probably also just plug that into a MIDI setup and actually play drums on it. That's electronic drums. Electronic drums were one of those other things that like it was really interesting. Now again, it's never going to be exactly the same as really playing on a skin or even fake drum set. But it was interesting how while all these fans were pissing all over electronic drum kits, this was around 2000. I knew personally several pretty famous drummers who had already were like, "Oh no, we've been doing this already." Like don't tell anybody, but in the studio a lot of what you're hearing are, is an electronic is a pad, because it's reliable. It's more reliable. So, Yeah, and that's not a big deal. A V drum brain's not a big deal. Yep. Yep. And if it's good enough for Neil Peart, yeah, and there's a reason. There's a really good reason why they use them. Now, live, I get it. Live, I get the design. I mean, I even know some that do, Right, exactly. That's always that paradigm between kind of what people think goes into producing something like an album or a game for that matter and what actually goes into it. What actually has to be considered, and time efficiency is this really major part of it. Yep. I managed to see them twice towards the end of their career, but Neil Peart was definitely the main attraction. I mean, everybody's great; they're all great, but watching the overhead cameras of him playing that kit, you're just like, this is really nuts. Yep. Yep. It is. It's just yeah. That's the old joke, the old band joke. Should your drummer do a drum solo? Is it Neil? Is he Neil Peart? Then no. I mean, yeah, there are other great drummers too, but that's kind of the joke. Is he Neil Peart? No, then don't. Oh yeah, yeah. He's really good too. And there's something to be said for that too. And that's honestly what always impressed me about Dan and Dan's drumming, is that we had a pretty scaled back kit, and they could do some really really cool stuff with just knowing what to do with the drum, right? And again, that's one of those things people think, oh, a drum, you hit it. There's a lot more you can do with a drum, and a lot more goes into hitting a drum. And again, drums are not my thing. I tried, not my skill set. All right, Bill Ward's another one. Yeah. Are you Bill Ward? No? Don't do a drum solo. You're Bill Ward? Okay, yeah, do a drum solo. That's the funny part. Like when I got back into music, I really wanted to do drums. Then after some very basic lessons, I was like, yeah, I don't think so. Was You could apply singer to that too. You could apply lead singer to that too. That's funny. Thinking in terms of like that low to mid level rock lead singer, of course. Yeah, that one that's at every practice that you're just kind of like, yep. Well, that's what always gets me. And musicianship is to a degree athletic. Like I posted this morning myself piping a little bit, and it's the first time I've actually piped. Yeah, Keith Moon's amazing too. That I piped in 2 weeks for a duration, and it's amazing how quickly you can get out of shape not doing something as regularly as you were. But drums are athletic. Like you are an athlete playing a drum kit. Then again, I've also seen some hand drummers, and I'm not talking the ones at Pagan Pride Day drum circles, though there are some good drummers there too. I'm talking about Middle Eastern or Indian hand drummers that you're kind of just watching them and you're like, it's two hands and one or two drums. How are you even getting those sounds? You know? And it's just absolutely crazy. Yeah, right. I might be able to play drums in this. I actually did better with Rock Band drums than I did real drums, but I did much worse with guitar. Because again, I was trying to play like a guitar, and I'm like, all right, no, that's not how this is working. Yeah, it's gonna work out. It really is. Like I said, no, that's not how any of this actually works, and that was my problem with it. And I get it; it's different. It's an interface for a game, but I was like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. It was definitely a moment from a commercial, TV commercial. But at least the drumming, I'm like, oh, I just hit this now. Okay, I can figure that out. When I have spent a little bit of time on particularly stuff like a Tupan, which is a double-sided um, Bulgarian or Armenian Turkish drum, I've actually gotten like not terrible at it, but with very simple rhythms, you know. Not anything that I would consider at all complex, not compared again to what I've seen people who really spend their life playing these very simple drums. Yeah, that's always rough. It's always rough when you're fighting all these other things and you're trying to get yourself going on an instrument. You know what? Leave it out. Since I have set up my instruments that they're all in one room and they're all displayed, and that's part of the issue too. Is I don't keep my guitars out; I keep them in cases, and I really should keep them out. So I knew if they were out, I'd pick them up and I'd play around with them. But if you keep it out and you keep it on a guitar stand in the corner of the room, you might be like, maybe even 5 minutes. I mean, even 5-10 minutes a night is does something. Oh yeah, yeah. What kind is it? What'd you get? Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing that some people DIY. Oh, nice. Like I know I've gotten really lucky. Like almost all the guitars I've picked up, and I guarantee that they've been cheap guitars. Well, except for one, but I gotten it used from somebody who was a player. They were all ready to go right out of the box, and that was really nice. But I mean, one was a starter Squire Strat. I mean, they're not meant to have much done to them. The other is acoustic electric, and the Schecter I'd gotten secondhand. I gotten from a friend who was a very good guitarist who just didn't need that guitar anymore, which I since sold. But I was fortunate that all of them I got. Yeah, Epiphanies are good. Yeah, that's really nice. That's good. That's really good. It's like a really good deal. I think it's defense roll rating. I think what slows this game down. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know much about him. Like I said, my foray into guitar is very limited. It was mostly just to have something else to do besides the pipe and teach me some theory. Oh yeah, that's great. Since I got the hurdy-gurdy, though, that's kind of been my secondary instrument. And I don't spend as much time with that as I do on the pipes, obviously, but I try to get in time enough to feel competent at it. And I really love it. What am I working on in the game? That's a good question. Well, what I was just looking here now. Well, I just came out today, really, what I'm going to be working on in terms of actual progress is finishing the scenario I've been working on that the in-person group is playing through and getting basically the last encounter area done. That's kind of what my goal is for today. Let's see. All right, and that's what you find out now is that unless you're buying a vintage Strat or something like that, or one of the really vintage guitars, you generally are probably not going to get something that isn't made in the same exact way as the $400 guitar. I mean, yeah, it needs better materials. There's more time with it, but yeah. So what I'm actually going to work on, what I would decide to go over today a little bit while we're here, is, I mentioned that the one thing that has slowed down, that is still slower in the game than I'd like, is combat. And that's because combat in these things is always ridiculously slow because it's a simulation of combat, right? And, you get to that point too then, well, if I make it too deadly and player characters, if it's Middle-earth roleplay and characters drop dead with one swing of a knife, then that's not very heroic or gratifying. So from early on, I had the game opponents or NPCs broken down into nuisance threat, low threat, average threat, high threat, which is almost equivalent to a hero character, and a grave threat, which is generally going to be your extremely dangerous. Yeah, Cyberpunk. Yep, exactly. Unless they're wearing body armor, and they never die. Shadowrun. The Shadowrun gunfights that were like the A-Team, the early Shadowrun gunfights, where Blake's character dropped a hand grenade right in front of himself just to see if it would do anything and didn't even take damage. I was like, all right, this is broken. This is broken. That was Shadowrun 1. But what I think the solution is, so what really slows down combat are the resistance rolls. Because the way it works is that a person makes an attack and that factors in the amount of damage they do, is how successful that attack is. That works really well. And I've been very happy with that. Yeah. Oh, I know. The newer versions of Shadowrun are very deadly. Very deadly. In fact, when we played Second Ed Shadowrun, we were shocked how quickly characters could get killed. That was kind of like, oh, they fixed it. Everybody had True Magic Light Show. So I think the solution is just to reduce the resistance rolls that are had by a lot of the foes. Because I want the characters to feel epic, right? I want them to feel cinematic. I want them to feel like they can go up against a whole group of bandits and cut their way through it. And the problem has been when the bandits, even like average threat bandits, make their resistance rolls, it really slows it down. And in my mind, I'm like, all right, these heroes should have killed these guys already. Like it works well for the low threats and the nuisance threats. Nuisance threats are mobs. They work off a mob principle. Their stats are inherently tied to how many of them are still standing. Each hit reduces the number that are standing. Oh yeah, absolutely. The turn-based, and I don't have a better solution for that, by the way. But the turn-based simulation of combat in RPGs is unrealistic, slow, and boring. In most cases. When they go on for hours, you know. So what I'm thinking is, for this game, having the average threats have no or a less of a resistance roll than anything higher than that. Because, like, again, your high threat is meant to basically be competitive one-on-one to a, maybe not deadly, but competitive. So I'm just trying to mentally juggle, is there a way to do this without blowing this entire system? I mean, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine with the hero characters getting hit upside the head from a great club from a foe and shrugging off most of the damage. That's how it's supposed to be. Because I've also seen cases where the dice do not work in their favor and they end up nearly dying from a dagger wound. Now, guaranteed it was a weaker character. It was Blake's character. It was a weaker character. Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And D&D 5 has to some degree balanced this out a little bit, but still it is still really tough. And Blake can testify running his game. Like, there have been a couple NPC encounters that if we got initiative, we just wiped them out. And it was the same thing when I was running 5th Ed. When the party would gain initiative, especially with 6 people, whatever it was didn't stand a chance. I mean, unless it was something that was impervious to their attacks or could do massive amounts of damage in one shot. Well, and I think that's where the actual design of the encounter comes into play, right? Like, I think that's when you have to think about, do I have obstacles? Environmental or lesser creatures that create obstacles that some of these player characters can negotiate easily while one person takes on the grave threat. Then does it look very one-sided in that one character is always taking on the grave threat and winning the show? It's really tough. But in my case, even at the playtest of the convention, what I found is there was one point where I just kind of declared that they killed a couple things faster than what they should have. Yeah, the action economy is a big thing. Because I just didn't want them to spend the next half hour of this 3-hour game session rolling dice. I wanted them to hit something and kill it and feel heroic. So I think the solution in this case is going to be to change the way the resistance rolls work for non-player characters. Again, this won't affect player characters at all. They'll keep doing the same exact thing they've always done. But as the game master, I think I'm just going to really increase the amount of damage low-ranking NPCs take. They already have less health levels, but that still didn't matter. But I think if I reduce the resistance rolls, like maybe give them half of a body resistance roll, so that there is some tension, there is some threat, I think that might be the way that I resolve this. Because I don't really want to change the system. I think the core system of the fight, of the combat, works pretty well. It's just I've seen non-player characters, obstacles, threats, really spend a lot more time on their feet than they should. And I think I just have to rethink how the resistance works. Well, okay, so I think that's different. I think that's almost that MMO feel of pulling the Blackrock Knolls, which I know Blake and I had the experience with that, and Russell and I have talked about that, where suddenly you're in this 2-hour-long battle with hundreds of gnolls while your computer's lagging because it's 1999 and You know, you're just past dial up. But yeah, I think that's different. I think like if it's a case where it's this swarm that they have to fight through, and especially if it's a case where they've brought it on themselves, then I don't have a problem with it. But this was just in this scenario in the playtest, and I think most people have seen this part of the scenario, or it's not that big of a deal that if you were to play this game, this scenario, I don't think it would ruin it. But there's a scene where there's several skeletons and then several placed greater threats. I mean, the skeletons are literally your claymation animated rise from the corpse, and look about yeah, seriously, go for it. That have risen up, and they're meant to just be this thing that players cleave through, and that worked pretty well because they were nuisance threats. So that effect actually came off really well. But then even the average threats, which were these slightly greater undead, it just kept going, and I eventually just had to be like, okay, so there's two left, there's four of you, you overwhelm and kill these guys, which is fine, except then that's kind of like, well, why are they even there, right? That's poor design of a scenario. So again, I think to define what the reason for that creature in the encounter is. In this case, it was just to wear down their resources, so then they could have these encounters where they do have to fight this group. They might do some damage, but they're not very hard to dispatch. And I think then it becomes a slightly different dynamic. And I decided not to sit and work on the one scenario today because I know at least two people who are probably going to watch this later or tune in are going to be playing this scenario in the next couple of weeks. So I have it in the background and I'm reading over my stuff, but while we're chatting. But I thought I'd bring up the threat thing because I said earlier about streamlining and making a game faster. And I think this is the one section of the game that I found isn't as fast as I would like. Is kind of like group combat. Because to me, I was trying to make it, all right, let me make it feel more epic. Let me make it feel less RPG-ish, a little more cinematic, and it still is very RPG-ish. And I'm still kind of fighting that. Like, how do I get that happy balance? And I think that's part of the challenge of all this. B Breadman. B Breadman's following me. Thanks, B Breadman. You're the second bread-related person I have sort of following me. It's not a baking channel or cooking channel, though those are quite popular. So the high threats should get your full range of abilities. Let's start with half resistance rolls. Standard defense rating and half pull resistance rolls. So if a character has a resistance, if the resistance would normally be 8, they only roll 4 dice. I think that could really change everything. Well, and that's a lot of it. All right, that's another 4-hit-point dragon. No, I haven't heard that tale. Tell me the tale of the 4-hit-point dragon. That one sounds exciting. Okay. But right, it's a lot about encounter presentation too. And like the final encounter we had for the 2 year long campaign was, I thought it was very high powered. There were a lot of big foes and smaller foes in there, and I thought that came off fairly well. And I think a lot of it just has to do with how you stage the individual encounters. And I borrowed some of this from some of the early RPGs that tried to deal with cinematic situations by having what they call mooks. Feng Shui is what I'm thinking of, where you basically have your villain, and his henchmen, and the henchmen are mooks. Like the hero, no problem. The hero is going to beat the mooks, right? That. They're going to slow the hero up while the villain enacts their plan. That's kind of how I viewed the foe structure in this game. Let's check out the 16 hit point dragon. I'll read this in full later. I'm just doing a quick skim. But I was just from what I'm seeing now. Paper. Right. And a lot of this, yes, absolutely. And a lot of this comes down, a lot of it comes down to play the group style too. As I mentioned, my previous group, they're very roleplay focused, very character centric. They're very much about their own and their party survival, but not to a degree that it ever slowed up the game. Like they would take risks. But, when they did encounter a really dangerous threat, which was an adult red dragon with a Githyanki riding it, they did not even consider, after it pretty much torched half the town that they were in at the time, they did not even consider confronting it. But hit point wise, they could have killed it. Like, they could have. Someone probably would have died, but they could have. And so again, it was like, right. Absolutely. To have to have kind of this sideboard of mobs, and that's what I've started doing in D&D at least, is always having this kind of fluidity about the encounter. And I think a lot of people, the mistake they make, and again, we've all been doing this a really long time, the mistake they make is that, well, it says there are 6 orcs and an ogre, and the party wipes it out in one shot, or the ogre cleans their clock and the game master has no idea how to respond to that. And I remember we saw that a lot formerly, Blake, when we were playing. Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. Just to continue this sense of threat, to continue this sense of tension in the encounter. And I think, I'm sure we've all had the experience, but now Blake and I can think of a couple points early on where a game master or DM threw something at us, and it's clearly like killing 2/3 of the party, and they're just not mitigating the encounter. And clearly this is because they overpowered the monster compared to what the players could do. And that's an inexperienced thing. That's a poor judgment thing. But I remember the one case in particular where we had just made these new characters and the DM pretty much wiped them all out, like in the second encounter of the game. And we were like, hello? Like that wasn't for anybody, So it's I think that's definitely an experience of juggling act that we all kind of learn. I mean, I found with the 5e group, when I first started with 5e, I was totally blown away by how much damage they could do. And I wasn't thinking about it. So like I said, they at one point took out an Etin or a hill giant, like 3 of them, like half the party did. And I thought they were just going to run. I was like, oh, this guy's going to come up while the others are out scouting. And they're like, no, they attacked it and they killed it. And I was like, huh. Now they took damage. They took a good amount of damage, no doubt about that. But still, it went very differently. And Manticore. I had a Manticore. They were on a riverboat. And I had a Manticore. There were these kind of, evil raiders led by a half-orc. So the river pirates were trying to get onto the ship. Manticore swoops down, fires his quills, missed most of them, and that was part of it too. Lands on the deck, and they just killed it. Like, they just, 2 of the characters just totally wiped this up, And I'm like, well, that was unsatisfying. But, I mean, that's why it's a game. Sometimes it goes that way. And part of that was my planning and the dice. I mean, my thing is, I think it's better to do exactly that. Have kind of your standard encounter, and then throw stuff in if it gets tougher. If you want it to get tougher. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So that's the other thing. Monster special abilities. That definitely totally changes everything. Yeah, when I saw those, I was like, oh god, here we go. Because I remember they did all kinds of, they were like mini beholders. All kinds of really annoying things to you. Yeah, failing my constitution check for three turns in a row sucked too. I'm like, that's like my second best thing. But that's why they're dice. That's why it's a game. Oh yeah. Well, I think you actually said it, to be honest. I mean, if you didn't say it, I think it was kind of implied. Like, I knew it. Like, I remembered how that worked, and Neil picked it up. But I think he just observed it. But I thought you even said, oh, it missed. And then, you didn't say anything else. And I was like, I don't think you wanted to say that out loud. But I think that's where Neil picked it up from. That's why he got it. Yeah, that's why I thought it was a flop. The murder bear. And he walked 31 encounter. That's funny. The visuals of that are great. This Ewok just, did you have a spear, an old stone spear, just running through with a stone spear? Yeah, in my Star Wars game, I play the Jawa combat engineer, who was laden with like missiles and a rocket launcher and a hand flamer and like, oh, you know, just like this, just bent on destroying anything he encounters that gets in his way. I blew up a hut in one shot. Almost. Huts are pretty tough, but I hit it with a rocket launcher when we drew it out because we killed all its henchmen. And of course we ran. It was how wounded it was, and it called for more henchmen. We were like, "Yep, time to go." I mean, did you say yub nub the entire time though? That's what you got to do if you're gonna be the murder Ewok. Small kills, yeah. 45 teeth. Yep, stalk them and stop them from escaping. That's pretty funny. I mean, Ewoks were the beginning of the end, but they also were pretty sinister off the bat. They were going to eat, like, you know, Han Solo and Chewbacca. They weren't quite as cute and funny initially, I think. Then they became kind of like the death knell. The death knell of the franchise. Or at least the shift of the franchise. I never actually minded the Ewoks. Again, I was always like, that's kind of weird. Yeah. You could be an Ewok seer who like reads their innards or something, even if you can't really do it. And the Ewok starts disemboweling the half dead and the fallen enemies. Yeah, I think that changing the resistance rolls, at least in Tales, is going to be the key to streamlining combat a little bit. I mean, like I said, I don't care that a player gets hit and, you know, shrugs off damage. That's part of the game. The heroes of the game are supposed to be kind of overblown in comic book. Sugar their fallen companions, yep. That's funny. Yeah, like in the entire party, the bad cop is the Ewok. So what did Ricky play that one time? A Rodian, like a midget Rodian. I don't know if you were in that game. A midget Rodian, like pyromaniac or something. I was like, this is just never gonna end well. Hey, is Ricky still playing with you guys? I don't think he added my new account. I haven't been in touch with him in a while. Visually, it can be dangerous in bands. Okay. Yeah, okay. It's fine. We'll leave that there. We'll leave that one there. I hear that one. We have a few MIAs as well. There's layers of reasons. Yeah. It's not even necessary. I just wasn't curious because I realized a while ago that he never added me on the new account. So again, I'm way I said this discussion with one of our players about some issues, not with anybody playing right now, but with extended group, that I was like, look, I'm done. I just want to play games. I don't want drama. I don't want insanity. If somebody feels they can't, doesn't want to, shouldn't be involved, or if they present an ongoing issue, I I'm fine with them not being there. You know, I'm just at that point in life. I'm like, yeah. Especially because we don't, you know, we're not gaming for 8 hours every weekend. You know, we game for 2 to 3 hours every other week, or let's say we game for 3 hours every other week. We hang out for a half hour on either end. There's just not the time. Not the time at this stage in my life to have things that are just ongoing situations or problems or whatever. Nope. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Again, like I take this seriously in terms of the amount of work I put into it, but it's still for fun. And I'm not going to sit and have fun and be annoyed and be frustrated. And, you know, like I said, I've definitely had some blunt conversations recently about group dynamics and some things that have happened over the past 2 years. And I've been like, you know, I think I'm good. I don't think I need to keep having people around who just are creating stress for me or anybody else. Like, I'm pretty easy. You know that. I'm pretty easy at this point. If someone wants to show up, they show up. If they don't want to show up, they don't show up. If they're having a bad day, they want to leave early, whatever, you know. But when it kind of becomes a thing that keeps derailing the group, I'm like, nope. You know, like I'm not gonna be the one to put the energy out at this point. After the past 3 years of life, for everybody, I mean, I think me personally in the extended world environment, I think everybody can say, look, you know, let's not make this any more difficult or complicated. So it's funny. I did some deep reading the other night on both the Call of Cthulhu Insanity rules and some alternate systems, and I do have some stuff in here about this, and it's really interesting because even the new Call of Cthulhu is definitely improved over, you know, forget 30 years ago, but even the one edition that I read really thoroughly, the 5th edition, I mean, it's definitely really captured what the insanity trait is, and that it's a stressor. Like, you don't become bipolar from running into Hastur. You know, that just doesn't work like that. But that you can have things like fear reactions and stress reactions from horror. So that's definitely improved. I'm just kind of skimming through my version of it now. Obviously, this will take a lot more work. Like, this is just a couple paragraphs I had jotted down. And again, like, some of this stuff is brain chemistry. Like, schizophrenia is brain chemistry. And I have to... Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's the indefinite insanity rules now are different. And they even say at permanent insanity, it's totally up to the keeper at this point as to whether or not the player can keep playing, unlike the old rules where you just lost your character. But it definitely impacts the character. I mean, they're much more likely to have psychotic breaks from stressors. And, you know, knowing people who've been through some really severe PTSD, I think I can get what they're saying here. Like, you know, that certain triggers will be much more severe from characters operating under this constant stress. It's still not perfect. And they even say at the start of the section now, this is meant to imitate concepts of insanity in the 1920s, and it is based on the reactions of characters in Lovecraft stories. It's not meant to be an actual medical treatment of sanity, you know, like, or insanity. Like, it's a game. It's not meant to be an actual simulator. And I think I have to evaluate what role this plays in Tales too. Which again, it's not a horror game like that. I think I really have to differentiate between stuff like schizophrenia and borderline personality disorders that are chemical. issues with the brain. That we know they're physiological. We know they're chemically based. We now know all this. Versus something like obsessions or phobias that can come about later. But I would argue even obsessions are really rooted in some sort of underlying brain fundamental. You know, it's kind of the old thing. Like most people pick up cigarettes, get mildly addicted. Some kick it, some never kick it, and then there are some who literally can pick up a cigarette and have it once a month and never think about it again. So there is something underlying there that deals and alcoholism. Like we get into that. That's a disease. We know that is a chemically, what would be the word? Induced and often hereditary disease. So I mean, stuff like disassociation happens from trauma. Fugue states happen from trauma. Identity disorders identity disorders are one of those kind of weird gray areas that we're not quite sure. They do come out from trauma, but phobias are always fine because you can get phobias from experiences. I know people that can trace their phobia to a specific experience. So yeah, I think like I'm talking about schizophrenia here, and I know medical schizophrenia is a different thing. But it can be there are stress related audio hallucinatory and visual hallucinatory disorders that come out as a result of something. I don't know. I'll keep taking a look. Well, it's a fun chat, guys. I think I'm going to run now. I'm going to actually do some writing that I don't want to do on camera because it involves spoilers for plots. Let's see. Well, and that's the whole thing. There's so many advances in the last 30 years. Like all of us who are on here today, at least chatting, are about the same age, same demographics. And we know how mental illness was treated all of our lives, for the most part. And that's why, and I've said this before, that's why when I have a friend who's younger or a student who's very open about a mental illness and they talk about treatment and they talk about issues that we might encounter, like especially in terms of a student, when I've had a student come up to me and say, just so you know, I have this condition. If I have this problem, here's how we deal with it. I'm thrilled. I'm like, you're being able to address this in a healthy fashion, not pretend like it doesn't exist, like we did most of our lives, right? Not pretend it's a failing of morals or strength or something, like the vast bulk of human history. Oh yeah. Oh, that was even worse. Again, like the Taint of Madness supplement for the Call of Cthulhu, I think it was second or third ed, that goes into what it was really like being in an asylum in the 20s. I mean, forget about, you can find a lot of that out now. Kirsten Potter, who is one of my music mentors and a very good friend of mine, she was a nurse at Danvers. The Danvers. In its heyday, I think in the 40s or 50s. 50s, 60s. Want to be horrified? Talk to her about that. like anything that we think was going on was way worse when people saw it on the inside. Like anything you read about or anything you hear about, except for some of those few videos that came out of some of those few films that came out of those institutions during that time. I mean, just horrendous living conditions for people who were sick. They weren't criminal. They weren't evil. They were sick. So, oh yeah, the past 30 years. Forget the past 100. So, but again, it still is an evolving science as well. And then I have to decide, like, okay, this is this dark sword and sorcery fantasy game. Like, do we talk about insanity in the modern medical context like I do here, or do I just put it in the world of the game? And have it act like you think it would in this setting. And again, that's what I was kind of relieved to see about the new Call of Cthulhu, is that it specifically says this is not meant to replicate our current medical treatment and understanding of mental illness. This is a glimpse into how it would have been in the 1920s. And I'm like, all right, that's way better than it used to be. Again, it was real cringe. If you played any of the early editions, it was, by today's standards, it was pretty cringe. So, I don't know. We'll find out. Oh, I haven't really worked on that section much. I mean, that might not even be something that gets really worked on for the first release. It doesn't play a big part in this game. It is the only way it plays part is that some of the magic can inflame, some of the sorcery can inflame issues that are already there. I guess we'll find out. All right. Yeah, have a good one. See you tomorrow night in our hot take on Dungeons and Dollars, the monetization and popularization of D&D. This should be interesting. As you know, I have a lot of things to say about it. I'm sure a lot of people do. And as I said, though, I do understand, though, that there are two sides to this. Being a person who'd like to publish a game, it's pretty expensive. And it takes a lot. And you can't rely on people buying the book, paying the way of the production cost. I mean, there's all these other things that go into it and ways that you have to deal with it. Now, again, having said that, I would never think of a video game structure monetizing for D&D, but we'll talk about that tomorrow night. But From the Tomes, Twitch TV From the Tomes, Fox and Board Games at YouTube, at Fox and Board Games, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and the landing pad, foxandboardgames.com. Thanks everyone for coming on today, chatting. More lively chat for Tuesday afternoon than I expected. Very welcome. I thought I'd be here typing and occasionally have someone pop on and go, hey, how's it going? If that. But glad to see everybody come on. Yep, catch you later, Blake. Sooner and later. Thanks for subscribing, following, lurking, chatting. See everybody hopefully tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll dig into some deep topics. Have a good day. Thanks a lot.